We need fresh blood to take this company forward. That was the line that ended my career, spoken at a quarterly review by a man who barely knew what I did. My name is Ethan Vance, and for 3 years, I was the quiet architect behind Corelynx Systems, a data solutions startup that began as a pipe dream in a rented warehouse in Charlotte. Back then, we had folding tables, bad coffee, and one shot at making something real. While the founders, Mark Halstead and Eric Bloom, pitched dreams to investors, I was on my hands and knees at 300M, rebuilding servers from scratch and writing the code that would carry us to our first real clients. But none of that mattered to Grayson Ward, the new director of operations. 6 months in, he was already holding court at the conference table, tossing around terms like synergy and market disruption like they were gospel. I'd been there since day one, but he didn't even look up when he called my work adequate. I didn't argue, I just nodded and started reading my contract. Every clause, every forgotten protection my lawyer friend helped me slip in back when the founders were desperate to keep me on board. I had a feeling I was going to need it. Because when you've built the engine, they might forget your name, but they can't run it without your key. I didn't wait for permission. The moment I got back to my desk, I opened the company directory and started digging. Just as I suspected, Grayson had hired 4 new people over the past month, each with slick titles like Innovation Architect and Scalability Strategist. Their salaries were triple mine. Their credentials looked polished. But none of them had been there when the system crashed 15 minutes before our first enterprise demo. None of them had stayed overnight on Christmas Eve to patch a 0-day vulnerability with a coffee in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. They didn't know what I'd built, or why I built it that way. I kept reading through my old contract. Back when Corelynx was just a dream with a 15,000 angel check and a pitch deck, the founders didn't have legal teams. They had hope. And when they offered me sweat equity and shaky pay, I brought in a friend of mine, an attorney named Bridget, to look things over. She insisted on including clauses to protect my original work, encryption modules, deployment frameworks, API protocols. It was standard language in early-stage startup agreements, but rarely enforced. Still, Mark and Eric were so eager to get me on board that they signed everything, and they never changed it. That meant the technical framework, the core platform of Corelynx, was still partially under my legal control. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't planning to use it. I didn't need leverage, I had pride. But as I watched Grayson push me further into the margins, it became clear I was disposable to him. Just a legacy coder clogging up his vision of a sleek, modern workforce. And that's when the invitation arrived. Or rather, didn't. The company's big product launch was scheduled for next month. A massive event. Open bar, catered dinner, media coverage, investor presentations, live demos. It was supposed to be our crowning moment. The culmination of 3 years of late nights and 90-hour weeks. I was there when the first server booted up and the first client logged in. I had kept everything running without a single breach, but I wasn't invited. Instead, I received an email at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning titled Subject Team Restructuring, Immediate Action Required. I clicked it, assuming it was some internal update. Instead, I got a polite corporate kiss off. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately as part of our strategic optimization. No call, no conversation, not even a handshake, just a line in an email. After everything I'd done, I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes, reading that message over and over. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed to feel every ounce of how little I meant to them now. And once the hurt wore off, what came next was clarity. They didn't understand what I had built. Grayson didn't know that the sleek system he was preparing to demo was built on custom modules tied to my encryption protocol, that the APIs pushing live data to the demo dashboards were architected with proprietary routing logic I designed on my own laptop before Corelynx even had the money for AWS credits. He also didn't know I was the only one with the master deployment key. You see, Grayson thought he was firing a background tech guy. What he was really doing was cutting off access to the engine that powered his entire illusion. All those new hires, they had no idea how the backend worked. They understood theories, not legacy code. Flashy frameworks and buzzword compliance don't mean anything when your infrastructure is custom built. So I went home and opened my laptop. And I started planning my parting gift. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was clarity served cold. If Grayson wanted to show the world what Corelynx looked like without me, I was going to give him that opportunity. Just with one small modification, a demonstration based on cached sandbox data, not the live production environment. Because without my encryption key, nothing could go live. So I wrapped it, literally, one USB drive, a handwritten label, production deployment key Corelynx Systems. And then I waited for launch night. I didn't need an invite. Security still recognized me, and they had forgotten to deactivate my access badge. The plan was already in motion: the lights, the music, the investors, the champagne flutes. Grayson was strutting across the stage like a tech messiah while journalists scribbled notes and new hires watched in admiration. What they didn't know? The Emperor had no access. He fired the only person who could turn the system on, and the countdown had already started. Launch night was more spectacle than strategy. The ballroom buzzed with anticipation. LED lights pulsing along the walls, projection screens cycling through sleek animations of the Corelynx platform in action. Tables were dressed in silver linen, and each seat came with a gift bag stamped with the company's new slogan, "Redefine what's possible." At the front, standing beneath a glowing Corelynx logo, was Grayson Ward, basking in the applause like he'd birthed the very product he could barely describe 6 months ago. His custom, tailored suit shimmered under the lights, his smile rehearsed, confident. Cameras flashed. Investors murmured words like brilliant and visionary. I stood near the back of the room in a dark blue blazer, mostly ignored. No one recognized me except for Jared, one of the older systems engineers I'd mentored. His eyes widened as I passed, but I gave him a subtle nod. "Stay quiet. Watch." Grayson took the mic. "Tonight isn't just a launch. It's a transformation. You're not just witnessing a new platform. You're witnessing the future of data delivery." He waved his hand toward the giant projection screen. "And now I present Corelynx UVE." The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, silence. Then chaos. The screens flickered. Animations froze mid-spin. The live dashboards, which were supposed to display real-time data from client test environments, went blank, replaced with a gray error screen. "Error 53 Surefi, UVLB," the room murmured. Phones came out. Grayson tapped frantically on his tablet. I could see it from where I stood. He was swiping and tapping, trying to reconnect to a system he didn't have the credentials to control. From the front row, an investor raised his hand. "Is this part of the demo?" Grayson forced a smile. "Minor glitch. Our backend team is resolving it as we speak." Only there was no backend team available. Because I was the backend, and the API keys they were using had been revoked 30 minutes before the launch began. I hadn't touched a single line of production code. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I simply refused to authorize deployment into live mode. A legal right granted to me in writing, signed by the founders themselves. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A junior assistant jogged up to Grayson and handed him a small gift-wrapped box. Grayson looked confused. He opened it slowly, right there on stage. Inside, a single USB stick, labeled in my handwriting, "Ayusiduan Dalapio Vance." The color drained from his face. He looked out over the crowd, then toward the back of the room, his eyes locking on mine for the first time all evening. I smiled politely. He made his way down the stage, weaving through tables, ignoring confused greetings and awkward glances. When he reached me, he didn't say hello. He just whispered, "What the hell are you doing?" I kept my voice calm. "Running your show." "Isn't that what you always said I did?" Grayson's jaw clenched. "Turn it back on." I shook my head. "Not until you explain to every single person in this room who actually built that system. Not the title, not the budget, not the PR team." "Me? You're being petty?" he hissed. "No," I said. "I'm being honest." At that moment, Eric Bloom, one of the original founders, stepped out from a side entrance and walked toward us. I hadn't seen him in months, not since the board was restructured and he lost his operational power. "Ethan," Eric said, offering his hand. "Is it true? You still have the key?" I nodded. "I never gave it up." He turned to Grayson. "You fired the guy with the only bridge to our product." Grayson stammered. He didn't seem necessary anymore. Eric didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply turned back to me. "Come with me." We left the ballroom together. Behind us, Grayson tried to patch the moment with corporate spin, but the damage was done. Journalists were already texting headlines. Investors were quietly leaving. What was supposed to be the company's proudest night had turned into a cautionary tale, and I hadn't even needed to raise my voice. Inside a small side office, Eric closed the door. "Listen," he said. "We made mistakes. I should have pushed back when they brought Grayson in. You didn't know," I said. "No hard feelings. Are you willing to come back?" he asked. "Fix this." I hesitated. Not because I couldn't, but because, for the first time, I held the power. Not technical power, moral power. "Maybe," I said, "but not as a silent contributor. Not as the guy behind the curtain. I want full operational control, and I want a seat at the table. If I'm going to carry this company again, it'll be with proper recognition and equity." Eric smiled. "Fair? I'll take it to the board." I handed him the USB. "Tell them to plug that in when they're ready to move forward." With the truth this time. The aftermath wasn't swift. It was surgical. By Monday morning, Corelynx's investors were already demanding answers. Not just about the launch failure, but about how a former employee held the only key to the company's live infrastructure. The demo blackout had gone viral in the tech press, and phrases like catastrophic mismanagement and vanity leadership at its worst were being thrown around. Internally, panic set in. Departments that relied on scheduled data reports were paralyzed. Client-facing teams couldn't even run diagnostics. And worst of all, the back-end engineers, Grayson's fresh hires, were completely lost without me. They had no documentation, no root access, no clue how to untangle the system I had built from the ground up. That's when the board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't in the room, but word spread quickly. Grayson was grilled for nearly 3 hours, repeatedly asked to explain how and why I had been removed from the launch team. He blamed legacy fragility, then tried to pin the debacle on miscommunication. But it didn't work. One of the board members, a quiet man named Lawrence McCain, who'd invested early, finally said what everyone else was thinking. "You fired the architect without checking who had the blueprints." By Wednesday, Grayson was gone. No fanfare, no farewell post on LinkedIn, just a tersely worded email from HR announcing a leadership transition. His office was cleared out by noon. The champagne from launch night was still sitting in a back fridge unopened. As for me, I didn't come storming in with a demand list. I didn't need to. Eric Bloom called that afternoon and said, "The board wants to meet. This time on your terms." We met at a quiet bistro in uptown Charlotte. Neutral ground, no fanfare. Around the table were Eric Lawrence and 2 other board members I barely knew. "We know what you did," Lawrence said, not angrily, but with a trace of respect. "You didn't sabotage the launch. You just refused to help them fake it." "That's right," I said. "I built something real. And I wasn't going to let someone parade it around without understanding what it took to make it work." Eric leaned forward. "We want you back. This time for real. Not as the quiet guy in the basement. We need leadership. Technical. Operational. Cultural. You've already proven you're the backbone." I considered the offer carefully. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a company that didn't forget who kept the lights on when no one else was watching. "I'll do it," I said. "On a few conditions." They nodded. 1. I want the title, Chief Systems Officer, and full authority over infrastructure decisions. 2. I want to restructure the engineering team. No more fluff. We rebuild with people who actually understand the system. 3. I want retroactive equity for the 3 years I was promised but never received. Lawrence smiled. "Reasonable. Anything else?" I paused. "Yeah. I want the story set straight. Publicly. You don't have to name names. But I want our clients and our employees to know the truth, who built this company's engine, and why it still runs." Eric nodded slowly. "Don't." Within days, the pieces moved fast. An internal memo went out with my official reinstatement, and within a week, the external press statement followed. "We are pleased to welcome Ethan Vance back to Corelynx Systems as Chief Systems Officer. Ethan was instrumental in the company's early success and will now lead efforts to reestablish operational excellence, system integrity, and innovation moving forward." I didn't need the applause. What mattered was the shift inside the company. People remembered. Engineers who'd been afraid to speak up under Grayson now walked taller. Junior staff who once whispered thanks in passing now came to my office with ideas. It wasn't about ego, it was about culture. A return to substance over style. I brought back Jared and 3 other original devs. We rebuilt the deployment process, documented every line of code, and opened up internal training so no one would ever be indispensable again. Ironically, I was working to eliminate the very power that got me back in. because true leadership meant sharing the blueprint, not hoarding the keys. By the end of the quarter, Corelynx had restored all client-facing systems, regained its major contracts, and signed 3 new accounts, one of them a direct competitor of an investor who had walked out after the failed launch. Grayson. Last I heard, he was trying to land a role at a branding firm in Austin. The kind that loves buzzwords and polished decks. Me, I still came in early. Still drank bad coffee. But now I sat at the table where real decisions were made. I wasn't the background guy anymore. And the best part, I didn't have to burn the place down to be seen. I just had to let the system speak for itself. 3 months after I returned to Corelynx, the office felt different. The flashy digital posters Grayson had plastered across the workspace were gone. So were the overcomplicated job titles and the hollow motivational quotes etched into the conference room glass. What remained were whiteboards filled with diagrams, old-school server logs, and real conversations about how to solve problems, not just present them. One afternoon, while reviewing error handling across our new deployment system, I got a calendar notification. It was from Mark Halstead, one of the original founders who'd mostly stepped away during Grayson's tenure. Subject line: need a favor launch celebration redo. I stared at it for a moment. It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't corporate speak. Just a quiet olive branch from someone who remembered. The next week, we hosted a small event, not at a ballroom, but in our own office lounge. No caterers. Just homemade food, music from someone's Spotify playlist, and a projector screen patched together by our engineering interns. Everyone was welcome: interns, admins, and the handful of veteran staff who had weathered the storms. I was about to step out for air when Eric Bloom tapped my shoulder. "Come on up," he said, gesturing to the front where the projector had frozen on a photo of our original server rack, wires bundled with duct tape and a sticky note that read, "Dion, 2UH, EV." I hesitated, but the room clapped and laughed, and soon I was standing in front of the team that had brought the company back from the edge. I didn't build Corelynx alone. I began, but I remember what it felt like to think I had to. There was silence, respectful, reflective. When I was pushed out, I didn't crash the launch to make a point. I let the system tell the truth. I had built it with integrity, and I wasn't about to let someone fake its success. People nodded. Some of the newer hires looked down, clearly recognizing they'd been on the wrong side of things. And when I came back, I continued. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to build something no one could fake, a company that ran not just because of code, but because of character. After the applause died down, I stepped down and grabbed a soda. That's when Olivia, one of our youngest analysts, approached me. "Is it true," she asked, "that you gave Grayson a gift, wrapped USB right before everything shut down?" I smiled. It wasn't about the USB. It was about what it meant. She nodded, eyes wide, absorbing more than just the story. She was absorbing the principle. The next morning, as the office buzzed back to life, I began drafting a new internal policy: systems sustainability and staff ownership. It wasn't just about backups or documentation. It was about ensuring no single person could be erased, and no one person could ever again hold the fate of Corelynx in their back pocket. Whether through ignorance or ego, we built redundancies. We opened up mentorship programs. We made system design something everyone could contribute to, not just the chosen few. As weeks turned into months, the system stabilized and evolved. We replaced the clunky layers of middleware Grayson's hires had stacked in with leaner, smarter modules. We restored core client tools that had been sidelined during the modernization. Push. Support tickets dropped by 70%. Client satisfaction reached an all-time high. By the end of Q2, Corelynx had not only recovered but outpaced its original growth projections. The company had shed its hollow skin and found its original soul again. Quiet, practical, brilliant. Grayson's name was never mentioned in meetings, memos, or hallway conversations. He became what he had tried to make me: a footnote. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because while he had planned for applause, I had prepared for endurance. And this time, I wasn't building it alone. By the time we entered our third quarter, Corelynx didn't just feel like a company that had survived something. It felt like a company that had learned, and that mattered more than any recovery metric we tracked. One of the biggest changes was the disappearance of fear. Engineers no longer hesitated to speak up in meetings. Junior developers felt comfortable asking questions during code reviews instead of pretending to know. We weren't just building better systems. We were building trust in the process. And perhaps more importantly, ownership. We initiated a full transparency protocol for all infrastructure decisions. Everyone, regardless of title, could see our roadmap, review proposed changes, and even submit suggestions. I encouraged anonymous feedback, too. If someone felt unsure speaking out, they could still be heard. It wasn't just lip service. It became a regular part of how we ran things. And the results? They were better than even I expected. One example came from Melissa, a QA analyst with no prior dev experience. She flagged a redundancy in our incident logging system, one we'd overlooked because we were too used to it. Her insight saved us thousands in monthly cloud costs. Instead of brushing it off, we held a team meeting just to walk through how she spotted it. She didn't just save the company money, she modeled a culture where anyone could make a critical difference. Our systems became leaner, not because we cut corners, but because we cut ego. Meanwhile, I focused on securing what mattered most, our foundations. We rewrote all documentation from scratch, with backups stored across multiple secure sites. I worked with our legal team to ensure intellectual property rights were clearly assigned and responsibly managed. No more undocumented features. No more secret keys. Every system had a steward, and every steward had a backup. Redundancy wasn't a weakness anymore. It was wisdom. Even our clients noticed. One of our longest-standing partners, a logistics software firm based in Ohio, sent a thank you note after we restored their live dashboard during a server hiccup in under 4 minutes. Never thought we'd see that kind of response time again. It feels like the old Corelynx is back. But the truth is, it wasn't the old Corelynx. It was something better. Something that had stared failure in the face and come out clearer for it. And while I was proud of what we rebuilt, I knew the most important change had nothing to do with code or uptime. It was people. One morning, I came in early to find Jared, the same engineer I'd once mentored, holding an impromptu training session for 3 new hires. No one told him to. He just saw a gap and filled it. When I asked him later why he'd done it, he just shrugged and said, "Because someone once did it for me." That moment stuck with me. It reminded me that legacy isn't about systems. It's about what you leave behind in people. And if a company doesn't invest in that, no amount of tech will ever save it. By now, our numbers were strong, morale was higher than ever, and new client referrals were rolling in. But I didn't celebrate by expanding aggressively or chasing a flashy acquisition. Instead, I booked time off. 1 week, no laptop, no Zoom calls. I went hiking in North Carolina, cleared my head, and reminded myself why I'd fought so hard to protect something so many people had once taken for granted. When I came back, my desk had a sticky note from Olivia, the junior analyst. It said simply, "Thanks for making this a place worth staying." And that, more than any product launch or title change, told me we'd done it right. We hadn't just recovered, we'd matured. And we did it not by chasing applause, but by finally building a company worth being proud of, brick by brick together. Looking back, I never imagined that getting pushed out of the company I helped build would be the turning point. Not just for the business, but for me as a man. I had every reason to walk away bitter. But I didn't. I stayed calm, stayed quiet, and waited for the moment when the truth would speak louder than pride. And when it did, I didn't use it to get even. I used it to get better. We rebuilt Corelynx, not because we had something to prove, but because we had something worth protecting. And in the end, that's what saved us. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's resilience. It's the quiet strength to hold your ground when the world tries to erase your value, and the grace to lead again when that value is finally seen. To everyone out there who's ever been dismissed, overlooked, or replaced, your worth doesn't disappear just because someone else fails to recognize it. Build with heart, walk away with dignity, and when the time is right, return stronger, not louder. Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong, quietly? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more true life tales of resilience, redemption, and quiet triumphs.